Welcome back to New Americans Immigration Today. I'm your host, Erica Glenn, with co-host
Alexandra Okoli.
And today we're here to discuss more current events in immigration. So recently in the news, we have heard about the migrant caravan, which if you're not familiar with that, there's a group of immigrants who have left Honduras and are crossing through Guatemala, Mexico, in hopes of making it to the United States to eventually cross the U.S. border. And it's been a point of contention in the news because, as we know, our current administration is not for
immigrant. It's very anti-immigrant
climate, and it's a good question that a lot of people are asking everywhere I go.
Why are all these people coming when we have all of what's going on right now in regards to immigration and allowing immigrants into the country? So it is a good question. And then my dear friend gave a wonderful response, and that was
that they're in so much danger that they don't care. They still need to seek that asylum to better their circumstances.
And it's true, and President Trump has made it clear, I believe it was a few days ago, when he was asked about the migrant caravan, his response was, I don't care. When they get here, we're not going to allow them to stay here, which from a legal perspective is somewhat difficult to just say when we have laws, immigration laws, that provide an opportunity for someone seeking asylum to make that request when they get to that border with an asylum officer or border patrol. So it's kind of difficult to know how that exactly is going to play out. But as Alexandra mentioned, it's true. People are coming here because it's dangerous. They don't want to stay in their home country. They cannot get the same opportunities back home as they can get here in the United States, even if it is for work or to provide a better future for their children.
Right.
Because their countries are corrupt.
Exactly. And I think it's a good point. People are like, well,
they travel through all these countries to get to the U.S. to seek asylum.
And I think it's key to understand the countries that they do have to travel through to get to the U.S. And it's those countries that have the same circumstances as the country that they're fleeing. So the Honduran bus caravan, let's do a little bit of geography here. What countries do they have to travel through to get to the United States?
Guatemala and Mexico.
Exactly. Guatemala is also under a humanitarian crisis for the same reasons that Honduran citizens are leaving to the United States to flee their circumstances. And then Mexico as well, you know. So to seek asylum in either of those countries, they are potentially subjecting themselves to the same circumstances that they were undergoing at their home country. And so I know that's a question that a lot of people ask. Well, and they even ask it in the immigration court, because in your asylum application, they ask you what countries did you travel through to get to the United States. And you have to list the countries you traveled through and how many days you stayed there. If you're going on an asylum interview, the interview official of the department of the asylum office is going to ask, did you apply for asylum in those countries? No. Well, why not? You know, and so we understand that question, but it's key to understand that those countries are still similar to the country that they are, you know, traveling from to seek asylum in the United States.
No, it's true. And I guess just to go back to that, if you kind of look at just the steps that these families are taking and the risks that they're taking to make it to the United States. Number one, this is by foot.
Yep.
For the most part. At some points, you may have some type of transportation, but it's very limited, and it's by foot because you do have the risk of being stopped somewhere. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, these people are walking by foot for days, sometimes even months at a time. And are resting from here and there wherever they can find a safe place to rest. and then they're coming and continuing to cross. So you say Honduras to Guatemala to Mexico.
Right.
Well, even once you make it to Mexico, same thing. Mexico pretty much has the same kind of conditions as Central American countries right now, where it's not really that safe over there.
Exactly.
You have police corruption and you have gangs. In Central America, MS-13 is pretty much the biggest gang, and for people who live in Houston, we know this because MS-13 has become a recent problem
It has.
within the city of
Definitely.
Houston. So if you're fleeing because of gang persecution or fear of gang intimidation, if it's me, I'm not going to stop in Guatemala because MS-13 is in Honduras, where I just left. And in Mexico, even though MS-13 is not the biggest gang in
Yeah, they
Mexico,
have like those cartels.
exactly, they still have cartels, which is the same thing. So there's really no safe option. So the only alternative in the mindset of these families is safety in the United States.
Yeah, it's the closest border to safety. And yes, we do have gang issues here in the United States, not unique to just MS-13, of course. But in my most recent asylum trial, which is called a merits hearing, the government attorney asked my client why the United States, and my client was a very sophisticated witness, and he knew exactly what he was going through and why the United States. And he said that the policing in his country is not as effective in combating the gangs and the crime in that country as it is in the United States, Another thing that I think we need to take into account is the desperation. As you were covering, like just their trip alone, which could be on foot, it could be on caravan, which like the Honduran caravan, it could be by hitchhiking. I mean, I have so many different stories of clients and their journey to the United States. And it's not something that you just do, just to do. You do it because you're so desperate, even knowing the danger you're about to incur during this journey. I've had a client who was kidnapped by a cartel caravan with her baby, placed in an abandoned home, not fed for days while they were asking for ransom. She has to contact family in the United States, family in home country for money so that her and her child could be released. I have so many situations where, their journey is still interrupted by organized criminal groups, who are interfering with, their journey as they pass through those countries. So that's another example of how it's still not safe. And their journey is not safe, but the fact that they decide to still undergo it, it means they're desperate.
Yeah, and I guess one good thing to talk about, which again, I don't really think as immigration attorneys we don't have answers, but we can definitely provide insight and an opinion on what we think may happen based on our experience, and that's what the current migrant caravan is. What's going to happen once these people actually reach a U.S. border? Especially being that President Trump has said that he is not going to allow any of those families to stay.
Right.
And so I know a lot of people are wondering, well, if President Trump is saying this, then what's going to happen? Are all these people going to get turned around? What's going to happen? So do you have any opinion or insights?
Well, at this point, with the influx of migrants that are coming to the border period is going to be hard to control. Anyways, so Trump can say whatever he wants and implement all of these policies, but it's still going to be hard to control. Like the Mexican border itself, it borders several U.S. states: California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. So this wall that's been the talk of his campaign and now presidency, and has yet to come into existence. It's difficult now, as you stated. Once you get to the border and you are apprehended by ICE, which is Border Patrol, they ask you if you are scared to return to your country. A lot of immigrants think that they should not say that they are, even though they are. And they say they come here to work. So if anyone has family that plans on coming into this country by the border, it is important to be honest. And if you have fear of returning to your home country, say yes. Because when you say yes, then that is what makes you eligible to stay in the U.S. and pursue a case for asylum. You can, if you say it later on, you still have a right to asylum, but they make it a little bit harder for you because they use that initial record of your entry against you, because you never initially said you were
Scared, but now you're scared.
scared. That's fine. If you have an attorney, your attorney can get you around that. But at this point, with Trump turning them away, they still have a right, and until it's changed in the law and in the code, I mean, what can he do? You know, I think that USCIS, not USCIS, but the Department of Homeland Security is a little arbitrary in their policy manual, because, I mean, their policy memos that they issue with these new rules that adhere to Trump's immigration philosophy, it's still not binding, because it's what is codified in the U.S. code that is binding. And so I'm learning that in my immigration practice and trying to make that argument to judges. Like, you want to talk about a policy manual, but here I have that in the code, you know, or the immigration code, that it's this. So what is binding, the policy or the code, which it should be the code?
No, I agree, and I think it's a good segue, because it kind of answers the question of what's going to happen once these people arrive to the U.S. border, especially when we have a code that provides a process for seeking asylum, which is to express fear of return to your home country to get that process started. And so if we already have this in place in our immigration laws, and you have the president over here saying that, no, I'm not going to do this, it's a conflict.
Right.
So I think what's going to happen, which we have seen happen, is President Trump has started a process called expedited removal, which means, okay, I'm going to let you make your claim for fear, saying that you're afraid to return to your home country, but it's going to be so fast, your time, which means that the time that you are actually allowed to stay here in the U.S. and seek that claim is going to be so fast. Right now, on average, depending on which state you live in, for example, in Texas has recently received a few new immigration judges to help with the backlog of cases. In places like California, and even Baltimore, Maryland, they were in the news recently for a large backlog. So when courts have a large backlog, it means that once you seek asylum at the border, you get your process started. You are detained for a short amount of time. If you're eligible to get a bond from an immigration judge, you'll get an immigration bond from a judge, and you'll be released to a family member or a friend, someone here in the United States. And from that point, your case would usually take, on average, I think the average has been like a year and a half to sometimes 3 years. But when you have a backlog, you have that time period gets pushed back even further. And so, for example, in like 2013, you saw a lot of people who didn't have court dates until 2019 here in Houston. Which now that we've gotten more immigration judges, those people have had their cases presented, I would say, between last year and they're in the process this year, you know, right now. So with expedited removal, what Trump is basically saying is, for expedited removal, you may not even get a chance to get your bond or a petition for a bond before an immigration judge. That means that you may have to fight your entire case from
While
a
you're
detention,
detained.
Exactly, in a detention center. And so that's what I believe is going to happen.
Well, we also have to keep in mind that expedited removal was still in play during Obama's presidency. I think it was used differently, in which, rather than giving a chance to enter immigration proceedings,
They were just immediately
plates to be removed right away. Am I correct? Yeah, because in cases like that, I mean, unless they express fear. Again, going back, a lot of immigrants don't know or believe that they shouldn't say that they are scared to return to their home country, even though they're coming because they're afraid to reside in their home country. So even still to this day, under President Obama, because he's still my president, President Obama's presidency during his terms, he still holds the highest expedited removal rate as President of the United States, I believe. Because I know that expedited removal went into high gear during his presidency. Again, this had nothing to do with saying, I don't care that you're scared to return. It was just people who came across didn't express fear and they were detained. So, and it also had to do with the I'm trying to think of the word, the inefficiency of the detention facilities, because they were being shut down a lot too. And so with lack of detention facilities, the best thing was to just send them back rather than keep them in the deplorable conditions of the detention facilities. So if that's the case for Trump, again, he says he doesn't care how much fear you have, but you're going to go through this expedited process that still deprives you of certain means that you do need to prove your asylum case. It is hard to work on your asylum case when you're detained in a detention center. If you have an attorney, your attorney has to travel to the detention facility. It's hard for you to obtain the evidence you need from your home country if you're detained and you don't have as much access to contacting family members at home to help you get evidence you need to prove your case. So it does make it much more difficult for them.
Yeah, so I think in general, I think if there's anything that viewers can take away from the discussion would be if you have a family member or friend that finds themselves in a situation where they have to flee their country, no matter what country they're fleeing, and they're going to seek asylum or protection, is to always make sure that they express fear. No matter how long you are detained or questioned by an ICE officer, never let them intimidate you to the point where you fail to state your claim. You fail to tell the truth in terms of why you came to the U.S. And like Alexandra mentioned, is that often people will say, I came, to work here because I can make more money in the United States more so than I can back from, wherever I've come from. And there's nothing wrong with that, but making money in another country is not a form of fear. There's not a reason to seek asylum or protection.
There's legal avenues for that, and usually that's applying for a visa or something. So while you have a right to want to come here to work, that is not the best response or a viable response to coming into the United States. So I suggest not saying that at the border.
Yeah, that, and I think too, especially being that we're coming up on elections, I think it's very important for viewers to take time to educate themselves.
Yeah.
Everything isn't black and white how it appears. When we see TV ads for different people who are running for office, it's very important, especially on topics. If immigration is something that's very important to you, I would definitely say take time to educate yourself on it, and try to put yourself in another person's shoes, which it is very difficult when you have never been detained, when you've never been to another country, or put in a position where you had to leave that country because you were afraid. But in my mind, what I try to do to make it more real to myself is if I was in jail and I needed somebody to advocate for me because I didn't speak the language, number one, of that country or whatever jail that I'm in, what would I want someone to do for me in that situation? I think that's really one of the best things viewers can do, is to educate yourselves and put yourselves in the shoes of these people who are coming here. And it's not just a black and white issue. It's not something that's going to be solved overnight or in one presidential term.
Right.
It's going to take a lot of time to solve these issues, but we can definitely do our part to change how people in these situations are treated just by educating ourselves and taking time to find out and understand what they're going through.
I know that a lot of immigrants in the community tend to listen to their neighbors. you know, and their neighbors might not be as highly informed on the process or the correct avenues of the process. So if you are a neighbor, be informed, you know, and educate yourself so that you're not misinforming your neighbor who takes high value in what you have to say. I can't even say how many times I have clients that say, well, I heard this and this is why I did this, you know, and then I'm like, well, I'm the attorney and I'm telling you that it's not that and it's this. Stop listening to your neighbor. And so if you're going to be that neighbor, inform yourself, you know, educate yourself on the correct process so that you're not misinforming that immigrant neighbor who is relying on what you say more than what an attorney is saying. So it's really important to be highly informed.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe in another episode we can share some resources. There are a lot of resources here in the Houston area that you can actually utilize to help educate yourself and kind of learn about the process of being an immigrant. There's a lot of nonprofit organizations here that do allow for people of all races and backgrounds, ethnicities, it doesn't matter, to be a volunteer to help out people who are going through different processes with immigration. So perhaps in another episode we can share those resources with you all so that you can learn about them and possibly volunteer. It's another way to educate yourself and kind of understand, you know, what's going on in our country globally, but you can understand it, you know, as from a local perspective.
Right.
Because it truly does affect us no matter where we live at.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us again today. We always have a good time sharing our knowledge and feedback with you all. And so we look forward to seeing you all next time. So
Definitely.
thank you for tuning in with us again today on KBTV, channel 15.8, New Americans Immigration Today.